Boys. This is part 4 of the Hardy Boys, The Secret Warning, chapter 16. Now before I get started, I have a shout out. One of my viewers, Digital World, a big shout out to Digital World, and a big shout out to the rest of you as well. So here we go. I started reading this, I think, in the fall of 2022. So it's been a while, so I think it's time I wrap this book up. So like I said, this is part 4, so what I shouldn't be calling it the Hardy Boys, I should be calling it the Tardy Boys, because it's been a while since I started reading it. Chapter 16, Double Disappearance. Chet had already heard the diver's telephone report from the bottom. Say, the stout lad spoke up. Isn't there another telegraph or tachometer on the bridge? Sure, said Perry, but they wouldn't account for much now, except scrap metal, even if I could pry them out. The bridge is nothing but a mass of junk, and the whole ship's perched right on top of it. How about the strong room? Frank asked. That's probably badly smashed too, said the diver. A lot of debris will have to be cleared away first. The Hardy Boys went below to change out the scuba dress. What do you suppose Rolly will find when he gets to the strong room? I don't know. Looks as if we'll have to wait a while to find out. The question is, why were these indicators stolen? Joe shot his brother a quick surprised look. That's obvious, isn't it? Maybe it could also be a red herring to cover up the theft of the head. Remember, the thief knew that the hole in the Catawba side was bound to be seen by the salvage diver later on. Right, so he may have figured that by misleading the insurance company, he'd have more time to dispose of the head safely. But all this is assuming the thief could get to the strong room, Joe pointed out. Rolly said, the way to me is it's blocked. From the engine room it's blocked, Frank corrected. Maybe there's some other way to get to the room. When the Hardys returned outside, they learned that Shane, Perry, and Captain Rankin were holding a meeting in the captain's cabin to salvage the plans. Is there any other way he could have reached the strong room? The youth asked. Roland Perry hesitated. He might have worked his way in through the deck hatch or some companion way. I'll have to check. Besides, lads, Captain Rankin put in, would he have bothered to cut a hole in the side? That's true, Frank conceded. Shane remarked dryly, I'd say we're up against a pretty shrewd operator. Rolly said, Frank, is there any chance the thief could have gotten the head and then himself blocked access to the strong room? By George, I guess that's possible, Perry admitted. The Hardys and Chet exchanged quick glances. They had already found out, almost at the cost of their lives, that someone on Whalebone Island knew how to handle explosives. Well, Frank said, to sum it up, it looks as if there are 4 possible answers to the question of who cut the hole in the Catawba. 1, the thief may have been someone hired by the owners of the Corona. 2, he may have been a freelance diver after the head. 3, he may have been hired, met Monzufar, the owner of the head, to help him chip the insurance company. You don't have to name the 4th, Perry broke in. I can already guess that. You mean Gus Bach? I do. Bach's been a candidate for the thief since I first saw him on that bridge. Sure, Perry reasoned. What else can they do now around Whalebone Island? We know they wouldn't pass up any chance of big loot. Frank and Joe excused themselves and hurried down to the radio shack. Chet puffing along eagerly behind them. The call was from Sam Ridley in Philadelphia. What's up, Sam? Frank asked his father's operative. A couple of news items I thought I'd pass on to you fellows. For one, your dad's been found out through Interpol as to who sent that warning cablegram from Egypt. Frank's eye lit with interest. Who? The Egyptian police traced it to a Dutch goldsmith named Van Hoek who was living in Cairo. A goldsmith, Joe explained, sounds as if there might have been funny business with that pharaoh's head. What's the rest of the news, Sam? Frank asked, turning back to the telephone. The detective hesitated before replying. What? Haven't you any idea where he went? None, replied Radley explained worriedly, except that he was following up on that lead from Zufar. Along for the farthest safety, the Hardys readily agreed. Radley promised to arrange special flights with the Ace Air Service, which would be surrounding. The Hardys readily agreed. Radley promised to arrange a special charter flight with the Ace Air Service, which would be standing by as soon as the youths could get back to Bayport. After a hasty farewell to the friends on the Petrel, the boat Gertrude prepared. Anywhere from Mother, Joe asked. Her friend is better, but Laura plans to stay on in Baronsville a few days. Don't eat so fast. You're as bad as Tivoli, said Aunt Gertrude. How's Tivoli's appetite these days? Asked Frank. He does eat rather a lot. I'm saying to that, Aunt Gertrude said with pride. The two boys sped to the airport in their convertible and soon were taking off into the dusk toward a chartered plane. When your dad and I Sam Radley met them at the airport terminal and waited till the Hardys were settled in their hotel before calling the whole story. When your dad and I opened the airport locker, we found a walkie-talkie. What did you hear? Joe asked. Not much. The voice that spoke seemed pretty suspicious. Wanted to know why Zufar himself didn't answer. Then what? Frank inquired. He was told to stand by for instructions. While the gang did some snooping around, I suppose, to make sure there was no trap. Then Sam went on. Early yesterday morning, another message came in. The sandy-haired muscular detective rose from his chair and paced anxiously about the room. I tried to follow him in another cab, but lost him in traffic and I haven't heard from him since. Some of the gang probably got close behind Dad's cab and broadcast at very low power so the transmission wouldn't carry far. Both boys felt sick with worry but knew there was little they could do except await developments. Frank told Radley about Captain Ernie's cane and passed on the description of the helpful motorist with his car. Radley promised to have this circulated by the police. Radley left to return to his own room. Frank and Joe undressed and went to bed, exhausted by the strenuous day. They fell asleep. Joe suddenly woke. Some time later, a shadowy figure was darting around the window. Joe was out of bed in a flash. He sprang clear across his brother's bed and leaped at the intruder in a flying tackle. With a snarl, the man kicked backward. His heel connected full force to Joe's jaw, and the boy crashed to the floor in a daze. By this time, Frank was awake, and he jumped out of bed just as the man was disappearing through the window. Frank raged in frustration. He had started to put on his bathrobe in order to give chase, but he checked himself, not daring to leave Joe alone. Dashing to the room telephone, he signaled the operator. A man just broke into our room at 3211. He got away down the rear fire escape and went through the alley. Hurrying upon to his brother's assistance, Frank, relieved to find Joe groggily raising himself from the floor. Feel okay? Guess so. Slightly foggy, that's all. Joe waggled his jaw. I guess it's not broken. His eyes widened as he got up again, and Frank reached for a sheet of white paper propped up on the table. Frank read aloud, "Leave town at once or there'll be trouble." More on the other side, isn't there? Joe said. Frank turned over the piece of paper. The remainder of the message was, "And drop the Pharaoh's head case if you hope to see your father alive again." If only I could have nailed that creep, Joe complained bitterly. Did he get a look at his face? No, it all happened too fast. Frank went down the hall to rouse Sam Radley, whose room was several doors away. A couple of scout cars were cruising around looking for likely suspects. Can you give us a description to go on? Not a very good one, Frank said. The man was tall and had a dark suit. That's about all. He escaped down the fire escape. The house detective took down complete on the incident, but both boys had offered the services of a doctor for Joe, who vigorously declined. I'm fine now. Radley, meanwhile, had been prowling around the room looking for clues. A moment after the hotel detective had left, Radley went down and plucked something from behind the wastebasket near the window. Did either of you boys store this away? They shook their heads. A notice of art auction sale, Radley replied, holding out a small brochure from the Old Hornbrook Galleries in New York. An art auction, Joe explained, looking at the brother excitedly. This fellow must have dropped it going out the window. They found no marks or jotting on the brochure, which might lead them to a further clue. You know something, said Frank suddenly. There's an angle in this business we've been overlooking all along. What's that? Asked Radley. His gang behind all this must have some real knowledge if they've salvaged the head from the Catwa strong room. Remember, the story about the head being aboard was never published in the newspaper. Joe suddenly leaped to his feet as if he had been stung. Suffering snakes, blurted out. Bogdan, Fritz, Bogdan. What? Frank explained. I mean, he was a man I saw. The guy who broke in tonight. Radley and Frank stared at Joe. How can you be sure if you didn't see his face? I'm not sure, Joe admitted, but at least I'm positive that's why the figure looks familiar. Tall, slightly stooped, right shoulder higher than the other, just like Bogdan. And Frank was impressed by his brother's theory. And remember, we suspected Bogdan was eavesdropping on us at Zufar's office, Joe said. Sam Radley paced back and forth worriedly. What's your plan, Sam? Frank asked. We'll have police cover the airports and the train and bus stations, the operative replied. Meanwhile, we'll fly back to New York on our charter plane. The Ace Air Service pilot had planned to stay overnight in a motel near Philadelphia. Frank telephoned him and arranged to have the plane ready for takeoff. In an hour, they were bound for LaGuardia Airport in New York. As soon as they landed, they checked telephone directories to find Bogdan's home address, but could not find no listing. Maybe Zufar can tell us. He plucked out the art dealer's calling card. A few moments after Frank had dialed the number on Zufar's calling card, a voice answered hoarsely over the line, sounding as if he'd just been awakened. Yes, who is this calling? Frank explained the situation hastily. Zufar seemed to be flustered and incredulous at the idea that Bogdan might be involved in the Pharaoh's Head plot. But he gave Frank the curio shop proprietor's unlisted phone number and address anyway. Let's try Bogdan by phone first, Joe suggested. Frank called the number but got no response, nor there was any answer from the shop number. Bogdan's apartment was on the first floor of an old converted brownstone. Its windows were dark, and the doorbell could be heard ringing hollowly inside. We'd better keep a stakeout, said Radley. It was he who decided to remain on which the brownstone while the Hardy boys covered the curio shop. By 10 o'clock, the proprietor nor any of his employees had appeared to open the shop. Finally, Sam Riley arrived on the scene. Frank and Joe hurried to meet him. The operative reported that he called the Holt Hornbrook Gallery and confirmed that fact that a notice of the art auction had been sent to Fritz Bogdan. Hold it, Joe said. Here's Zufar. The art dealer was just stepping out of a taxi. He looked upset at the sight of the trio. Do you have a key to the shop? Radley asked. When Zufar nodded, he went on. Then suppose you go inside and search the premises. But you have no idea. You have no right to do that. I merely occupy the space here as a favor from Bogdan. Look, Frank said angrily, our dad was kidnapped carrying out a dangerous assignment for you. Joe broke in. We'd better call the police and get a warrant. Zufar flushed out a silk handkerchief and dabbed his perspiring face. No, please. Let us do as you wish. He unlocked the front door of the shop and they went inside. What do you expect to find? Zufar asked. Evidence, said Radley. If Bogdan Chris and Sam probed into closets, crates, desks, roll-ups, rugs, all in vain. Their hopes began to dwindle. In the dusty showroom, Frank paused and started around despairingly. Once again, the faded, upright Egyptian mummy case caught his eye. On a sudden hunch, he strode towards it. "Joe, Sam!" His cry brought the others rushing over. Frank pointed to several tiny borings in the case. These looked like air holes. Together, the three pried at the mummy case until Joe found a catch. When Frank and Joe wrenched it open, off came the lid, and the trio gasped. Wedged inside with his eyes closed was a bound and gagged form of Fenton Hardy. Their boys were shocked at the sight of their father in the mummy case. "Dad," Joe cried out in alarm. "There's a sofa in Bolton's office," said Frank. "Let's carry him in there." "What's the matter?" Frank asked. "Wait till we attend to Dad and I'll show you." The three laid Fenton Hardy on the sofa in Bogdan's office. Mohammed Zufar, visibly shaken, watched as Radley loosened investigators' collar, then checked his respiration. "I'd say he's been drugged," Sam declared. "We better get him to a hospital." While the operative telephoned for an ambulance and notified the police, Joe led Frank back to the Bulldog figure. The large figure was coated with pale green patina of weathered bronze. It was seated in the lotus position, legs crossed, hands cupped in his lap. Frank's face suddenly lit up. "Jumpin' Juniper, you think? I think this Buddha needs a skull x-rayed. That's what." As Joe seized the statue's head with both hands, Zufar came rushing up to the boys. "What are you doing? You may damage that." "Relax, Mr. Zufar. If this is one-piece bronze, I can't damage it. If not..." As he spoke, Joe applied slight twisting pressure to the statue's head. Suddenly the neck seemed to move inside the tight-fitting necklace. An instant later, the head came off. "You were right," Frank shouted. The lower portion of the neck, which had fitted inside the necklace, showed some of the greenish brown patina of the rest of the figure. Instead, it appeared to be hard-baked clay. "Looks like solid clay," said Joe. "It's clay, all right," Frank said. Their surface has been bronzed over and doctored with paint to give the same weathered look as the body. But whether the clay's solid or not is another question. "Let's find out," Joe urged. Let's see if this Buddha has a split personality." Joe poised the chisel on the head and gave it a sharp rap with a hammer. The face cracked and the clay fell away. They saw a yellow gleam of metal. "The golden pharaoh," the boys cried out. Zufar stared in stunned silence as the boys extricated the head from its broken clay shell. Frank and Joe were awed by the sheer beauty of the centuries-old statuette. A tiny vulture and cobra protruded side by side from the pharaoh's headdress. A long, slender goatee hung from the chin of a mask-like golden face. "Great Scott, what's going on?" All three turned as Radley strode wide-eyed. He told the boys that an ambulance was on the way. Then he quickly related what had happened. The perspiring art dealer lifted the object in trembling hands and examined it carefully. "Even this wouldn't prove that it was the same one that went down to the catwalk, would it?" Joe broke in. "What if Ramadan IV had two of these heads made? Is that possible?" Zufar shrugged. "Who can say?" Mopping his brow, the dealer added, "Anything is possible. If my trusted friend and associate Bogdan could be party to such a villainous plot." The piercing wail of a siren came from the street outside. In a moment, two ambulance attendants strode in carrying a stretcher. Soon after, the police arrived. Frank and Joe insisted on accompanying their father to the hospital. It was past 1 o'clock in the afternoon. The Hardys had just finished eating a long delayed breakfast in the hospital coffee shop when Radley finally rejoined them. "How's your dad?" was his first question. "Okay," Frank replied. Radley breathed a deep sigh of relief. The golden pharaoh's head, he told the boys, had been entrusted at the the Egypt Department of the Metropolitan Museum for expert examination. Sam's pilot was standing by. Soon they were winging their way towards Bayport. The alarm clock awakened the boys at 3 in the next morning. The boys showered, dressed, and hurried down the kitchen to find a hearty breakfast of bacon and eggs awaiting them. "You're a swell sport to get up with us on our account, Aunt Gertrude. Somebody's got to see that you two get properly nourished," Aunt Gertrude said. The boys sped off their convertible to the boathouse, where Chet soon joined them. "You wouldn't want to miss out on all the excitement, would you?" Joe said with a chuckle. "This may be the day we ferret out the final answer to the whole mystery, including the riddle of the Jolly Roger's ghost." The sleuth streaked out across Barmet Bay. Through the pre-dawn darkness late in the morning, they reached the Petrel, lying at the scene of the sinking just north of Whalebone Island. "What's the picture, Raleigh?" Joe asked. Better than we had any right to hope. I discovered the cargo had shifted enough so that I was able to cut through the forward hold. Barring trouble, I should be able to get down the strong room and into the next step down. The diver nodded. All along the coast here, a lot of ships still resting on the bottom of those waters. In fact, I remember seeing one enemy raider, and your friend Captain Ernie accounted for. He must have been quite a skipper, Joe said. A real tagger from the stories I've heard. Perry agreed. Had 4 enemy ships to his credit in the Atlantic. On that gain we gave him, he left the Svensson, the quartermaster, carved the latitude and longitudes of all 4 sinkings. The Hardy stared at the diver. "Latitudes and longitudes," Frank echoed. "Sure, same as a pilot painting his kills on a plane." The diver broke off his tender, and Matt Shane approached him. "Looks as though it's time for my next dunk, fellows. Stick around, I may have good news for the end of the day." Chet shot a quick whistle glance at the Hardys. "What's up? I saw the way you looked just now that Raleigh mentioned the cane. Don't you get it? If Joe's thinking the same thing I am, the burglar who did this may break in and have any information carved on the captain's cane, not his pearls at all. The location of those sinkings, right?" Joe turned to his brother. "You brought the cane along, didn't you, Frank?" "Yes, it's in our boat. We'll take a look pronto." 3 boys hurried down the deck and climbed down the sleuth, which was moored alongside. Moments later, they were exclaiming in surprise as they studied the markings on the cane. "Now we're getting somewhere," Frank replied as he held the cane close and studied the latitude and longitude of Captain Ernie's first sinking. "Here it is, off Newfoundland." Frank read the next set of markings, and Joe translated the position to a spot off North Carolina. "Wow," said Chet. "The history book says this was called the Graveyard of the Atlantic. These lines nearly dissect Whalebone Island," Chet said excitedly. "I wonder what kind of craft the captain sent to Davy Jones' locker down here," Joe remarked. "Let's get hold of him on the radio telephone," said Frank. "He can give us an answer." At first there was no response. "Captain Ernie," said Frank excitedly, "the last bag made by your destroyer, was it off Whalebone Island?" "Our raider picked up a U-boat in the dead of the night, a submarine," Frank said. "Right. We dodged her torpedoes and sank her with ash cans. Depth charges, that is." "Thanks a lot," said Frank. "That's great news, Captain. We'll tell you all about it later when we return your cane." Frank signed off and dashed out the radio shack. "You look as if you're about to jump out of your skin," said Joe. "Boy, I am," Frank explained, and told about the German sub. "Then you mean?" Joe's question was broken off by a high-pitched voice of excited crewmen running toward them. "What's wrong, Sid?" "An explosion down there." "Was Raleigh hurt?" "Doesn't seem to be from what he said on the phone." Tension ran high on the Petrel as the crew it was sheer luck. The diver related that he was about to enter the Catawba's hold. He had sighted a large squid which apparently came crawling into the bulk. Perry had backed off to give it a wide berth. As he waited outside the sunken freighter for the squid to swim away, a sudden small explosion blew the creature to fragments. Perry went on tight-lipped. Must have been a booby trap planted on the edge of the hold, and the squid brushed against it. Could have been me. The boys grimaced with a sudden loss of compression from a rushed air hose. The diver would have been crushed to jelly inside his helmet by the ocean pressure. Get the suit off me fast, said Perry, directed, grim-faced. I've got a score to settle with someone, Matt. I'm aimed to do it right now. Hold on, Captain Rankin. Step forward and grip the diver's shoulder. If you're implying Gus Brock's responsible for this explosion, you have no proof. I don't need proof, Perry said. Both Shane and Rankin pleaded in protest, but Perry refused outright to continue diving until he had dealt with Brock. Finally, the two older men agreed to come into the Simon Silver for a showdown. The Hardys agreed to take them to the other salvage ships in the Sleuth. Chet went along too. Moments later, the troop alongside the Silver. We weren't expecting visitors, Mr. Rankin, said the Silver skipper coldly. What's on your mind? An explosive was planted at the catwalk by someone who wanted to kill our master diver. We think Gus Brock has something to do with it. Where is he? Not on this deck, you won't find him, the skipper said. Gus is not here. The eyes of the Silver captain focused on the water. Trapped on the bottom, he'll be lucky to see daylight again. Gus Brock trapped, the Hardys and Chet startled. Roland Perry stared in disbelief. Don't give us that. Brock may be on the bottom, but he'll come up again. You'll have to take a long wait, said the Silver's captain. We'll wait. As he spoke, the captain jerked his thumb toward the bald-headed man with sandy eyebrows, whom the Hardys had seen outside the cave. With Brock, go ahead and talk to Gus on the phone if you don't believe me. Might as well, said Wally. Frank advised. He took a headset from the tenders and spoke into the microphone. This is Perry, Brock. You in trouble down there? Answer me. All right, I'm pinned if you want to know. Come on down and help me feed the fishes. Perry turned to Simon, company's salvage master. What happened? Like Gus told you, he's pinned. Our apprentice diver, Ryan, is trying to help him, but it looks hopeless. There's nothing you can do, Krause added in his guttural accent. Frank sensed another reason for the men's strange attitude. If you aim to keep us from finding out what you've been working on, he spoke, you're out of luck. We've already learned there's a German sub down there. Now, how'd you figure that, son, said Shane, from the American captain who sank her. Perry turned to Simon Salvage Master. Fosberg, okay, you heard him. What's the picture? Fosberg explained that the shattered U-boat had been lying on its side. Its stern was sunk deep in the muck and was now tilted upwards, resting on the ledge of the undersea reef. But an explosive charge which Brock had set off inside the sub that morning had partially dislodged it. On his next dive, the wreck had suddenly slipped off the ledge completely. Brock had been pinned underneath the flap of hull metal. It's gradually squashing him down there as the ship settles. Can you take a perch now on the bow and hoist is enough to free him? The salvage master shook his head. Bob's under the after ledge of the flap. Raising that bow would just push him down even worse. The only way would be to part buckle in the whole U-boat, so it's to raise the keel, but that's not a chance I was going to take. Not in time, anyway. Then there's another thing. We could cut away the flap with a torch. Too dangerous. Brock was carrying another charge of explosives and dropped it when the hull fell on him. Dynamite and primacord all set to blow if the flame comes anywhere near it. Then break out a cutting torch and another diving rig. I'll do it myself, Perry snapped. You kidding? The diver called back again. Perry dropped the phone and instantly suited up. The Hardy boys and Chet waited tense and silent as Perry made his descent. For a long time there was no word from him after he reached the bottom. voice came over the deck speaker. There may be another way to do this, Fosberg asked Frank and Joe Hardy if they're willing to come down and face masks and airlines. With face masks and airlines. Both boys quickly volunteered to do so. Perry went on, have each of them bring down an iron needle with a hoisting wire attached to it. The green ocean grew darker and dimmer as they descended. At last, like a still, ghostly monster, the long, slim hulk of the dead U-boat could be made out of the bottom. The Hardys felt an ominous chill as they saw Bach's helmet and shoulders extending out from under the jagged flap of metal below. Fosberg transmitted Perry's orders over the phone lines. He wants those needles jammed under the flap. Frank, you help Ryan with one rod, and Joe helped Perry. With grunting effort, the four divers at last got the needles wedged into position. Then Perry's voice reached the crew on deck. Okay, put a strain on those wires. As the winches heaved the wires taut, the rod slowly came upright, levering the metal flaps upward. In moments, the rescuers had pulled Bach free. Then came a long, slow ascent back to Simon Salvador. Back on deck with his helmet off, Bach gasped out of his thanks. Still want to break my neck, Rolly? Perry's somber face shook his head. Not yet. The rescue diver swore fervently that he knew nothing about what had happened. Haven't been near her. I'll admit I was the frog man who slipped a Petrol's anchor, but that's all. Okay, Gus, I'll take your word. Bach stuck his huge paw. I'm willing to call it quits. Guess I'll go along with that, Perry shaking hands. Now, Frank said to Bach, how about telling us what you fellas know? What you fellas are after aboard that U-boat? The diver opened his mouth to reply, but Krause cut him off sharply. Tell them nothing, Bach, nothing, do you hear? Shut up, Krause, Bach retorted. These guys saved my life. I'm not gonna tell them. I'm not only gonna tell them, I'm gonna cut them in. Ignoring Krause's protest, he turned back to the boys and Perry. You know what's going down in that sub? 500 grand in American currency. A cool $500,000. $500,000, how do you know? Krause, there was a torpedo dome on it. Bach went on to explain that in the closing months of World War II, a group of top Nazis had fled Germany aboard the U-511 with a fortune in American currency. Heading where? To South America, Frank asked. Right. The U-boat had been then shoved off to Whalebone Island for repairs one night and sent a reconnaissance party ashore. Krause got separated from the party and was stranded when his mates were suddenly called back to the ship because of the Svensson. Chet spoke up. Bach nodded. The German sighted Captain Early's destroyer with the Svensson engaged the U-511 and sank her, but Krause thought it got away. So Krause was the red-bearded apparition who scared the wits out of Tang, the lighthouse keeper. Bach chuckled. You guessed right, kid. Krause, the boys learned had met Bach by chance years later, and an exchange of information led the two to who had led the present salvage effort. In response to further questioning by the Hardys, Bach admitted his group was responsible for the various break-ins and highway incidents involving Captain Early's car. But their search for the sunken submarine had been fruitless until the prowler came upon Early's carved cane at the Hardys' house. That's the guy right over there, Bach said, pointing to his muscular member of the salvage crew. You won't hold it against him, will you? Frank and Joe shook their heads. No hard feelings as long as you're giving us the whole story. Bach, however, denied any knowledge of the ghost of the Hardys' house or the island explosion trap. Then why did you threaten Dad? I was plenty sore that he kept us from getting the salvage contract for the catwalk, Bach admitted. It wouldn't given us well cover for his job, but I kept you guys out of their hair. Right now, I'm sure glad you were around. It was nightfall when Perry telephoned electrifying news from the bottom. He had succeeded in forcing entry to the catwalk strong room. What about the head? Frank called down tensely. It's here, all right. looks like the one the insurance company described, and there's something heavy inside it. Sometime later, a breathless group gathered at Captain Rankin's cabin. On the desk lay a metal carrying case. Jeepers, unwrap it quick, Chet urged. Quick, stripped away the velvet cloth, revealing a glimmering gold head. Is it the real McCoy? Perry asked. Sure looks like it, Frank murmured. He hesitated and took out his jackknife and made a tiny scratch in the base of the statuette. Grayish metal could be seen beneath the gold. It's gilded lead, Joe cried out. A fake. He stopped short as the sudden confused noises and shouts hurried on deck. What's going on down there? Captain Rankin exclaimed. He and the others sped from the cabin as they reached the deck. The five shielded their eyes and staggered. Dense clouds of fuming vapor were building over the deck. Dear gas, Frank gasped. Look, those men. We've got to stop them, Joe yelled, his eyes stinging with pain. He groped forward past the fallen sailor and then fell himself, roughly thrown to the deck. Frank and Chet battled valiantly, but an instant later they were seized from behind in a grip of iron. Half blinded and choking, the boys were helpless. Soon the entire petrol crew was subdued. Many, included Roland and Frank, were unconscious. Frank, Joe, Chet, Rankin, and another man stood on the deck with their hands tied. But who? Frank murmured to himself. Dazed, the captive group squinted through the darkness as one of the mystery raiders approached them. When they removed their masks, the Hardys gasped. Mohammed Zufar, Joe cried out, and Fitz Bogdan. The fat mustache art dealer rubbed his hands and sneered triumphantly. Captain, you will now hand over the head which your diver brought up from the sunken cat one. Captain Rankin snapped back. Zufar chuckled, glanced over the rail of the dark water before he whispered, We, as you say, scuttle this ship and send you all to the bottom. This is piracy, Captain Rankin exploded. Zufar twirled his mustache. No, my dear Captain. Not with all the evidence lying on the bottom of the ocean. Your ship will disappear without a trace. Don't count on that, Rankin stormed. I hate to disillusion you, Zufar smiled. But your radar man has been in my pay all along. He has been the most useful to us. Harry Ignar, I don't believe it. It is true, nevertheless. He, of course, will die with you, and his usefulness is at an end. The Hardys clenched their fists, forgetting fear and their anger at being trapped. Chet Morton threw them a despairing look. Frank's jaw tightened. He thought, well, we'll have to play for time. In a loud voice, he asked Zufar, how did you and your gang get here? From a coastal hideout, Zufar replied with a gloating smirk. As soon as Edgar raided in that the Ramadan head was on its way up from the Catwa, we lost no time. Frank ignored the curio dealer and kept his eye towards Zufar. You had to keep the fake head from coming into the hands of the insurance company. Is that it? Exactly. Even though you and your brother detected the authentic head in New York, I still look forward to collecting $1 million in insurance from the Transmarine Underwaters, you see. But why were you shipping the fake in the first place? Chet asked. You couldn't have known before the Catwa would sink in a collision. To palm it off to somebody, Joe put in. Quite so. I intended to sell it to a wealthy South American collector. Meanwhile, Zufar explained the real head had been sent to Bogdan to sell secretly elsewhere. Then came the sinking. The art dealer shook his head sadly, but it enabled me, of course, to claim $1 million insurance if the fake head were never salvaged. Captain Rankin, who was standing, grimacing, now broke in his angry voice. Then Frank and Joe were right. You took off the telegraph and took on instead as a cover of the hole in the Catwa hull. At this, Bogdan stuck his face close to the Hardy. Smart kids, we'll see how smart you are when we sink here 40 fathoms underwater. Chills crawled up the boys' spines, but Frank, undaunted, pressed further. Who was your diver? Frank. No, Zufar pointed to a swarthy, thick man, one of the Bogdan's employees. He chuckled. And also the ghost that gave you such a hard time at Whalebone Island? Joe glared at the diver. So you blinked the signals, conked out Dad, and set the explosives. It was further learned that the boys had stolen Lawson's rental boat, left a warning note, ransacked Mr. Hardy's cabin, and stove the hole in his boat. Zufar went on. Our diver's ghost camouflage was quite useful since he had to stay in the island while working on the Catawba. He returned. You see, after you left the island the first time, what about the ghost we saw? Joe put in. That was me, Bogdan spoke up. There were two of you playing the ghost game, said Frank. Yes, Bogdan replied. No wonder you looked so familiar the first time we saw you at the Shaw, Frank muttered. Joe glared at the grinning art dealer. You're slick actors of our. Mostly that, but also partly to make myself appear innocent of any hint of fraud. Frank spoke up. That booby trap on the Catawba this morning, did your man plant it? Zufar nodded. It's a pity it failed. How about the warning cableman from Cairo? Was Van Hoek in your pay too? No. Oh yes, not only that, he made our counterfeit. Pharaoh's head. He hoped the cablegram might serve as a false lead, perhaps even frighten your father off the case. Unfortunately, Frank Hawk himself is a superstitious fool. The thought of the Pharaoh's cursed head began to prey on his mind, and he finally fled from Cairo. We lost track of him. We're wasting time gambling with these little brats who far Bogdan snarled. Let's open the Seacocks and sink the sub. Sink the tub. Quite right, my friend. But first we must have these 5 little shipmates below. It will be much better, I think, if no bodies float to the surface. Oh yeah, her harsh voice broke in. Maybe that's what you build your house will be doing when we get through with you. Men were suddenly swarming over the rail. Joe let out a yelp of joy. It's Gus Bach and his buddies. The burly diver leaped forward with a fist swing. Kraus, Fosberg, Ryan, and the Software's captain joined the fray. Bach paused long enough to free the Hardys and the others. Zufar's henchmen, stunned by the swift turn of events, fought back wildly, brandishing their weapons. Stop them, stop them, the fat ringleader shrilled, his voice rising hysterically. The next instant, Bach seized him and drew back a mighty fist. Don't hit me, I give up. Frank spotted Bachman about to swing himself over the rail. The youth leaped towards him and pinned the curious dealer's arms. Joe and Chet succeeded in disarming and capturing 2 more of the enemy. With Zufar, Bogdan, and the other prisoners tied and locked in the cabin, warm handshakes were exchanged all around. Looks as though we're all square now, hey Gus? Perry said with a grin. Who says, bubblehead? Bach retorted, I told you we're going to cut you guys in on the U-boat dough. We are, in fact. We were just bringing it over to you when we got wind. What was going on aboard? He emptied a canvas bag on the captain's desk. The Hardys and Chet gasped as bundles of water-soaked currency came tumbling out. There you are, pals, your share. 100 grand. Divvy it up any way you like. The stuff got a bit waterlogged in the chest, but you can still spend it. Perry and his mate stared in astonishment, unable to find words. Then Frank peeled off a sake bill and held it up. Careful, Bach said. That dough's been under in Davy Jones's locker a long time. It could come apart in your hands very easily. Frank nodded, kneading the fibers of the bill. I know. That's what I wanted to do, Gus. I'm off base. Unless I'm off base, this money's counterfeit, probably manufactured by the Nazis themselves. What? Bach seemed on the verge of apoplexy. Joe inspected the bill. I think Frank's right, he said. We once helped our dad in a case involving counterfeit money. We learned a few pointers in detecting phony currency in one way from the paper itself. I'll bet anything this isn't the same composition as paper used for American money. What a bunch of saps we are. All that trouble we went to, and a dough turns out to be fake. Krosko only shake his head and mutter something in German. We could be wrong. Somehow I got a feeling you're not. Bach slapped him on the back. Sam assured the boys he would give Mr. Hardy full details of the sleuthing success. Splendid work, fellows, the operative added. 2 days later, Fenton Hardy confirmed his son's verdicts about the money when he and Sam Radley boarded the Petrel in its pier, at its pier in New York. Bach and Krause are the only ones who were misled, Mr. Hardy added. That goldsmith Van Hock is now under arrest. No kidding, Joe exclaimed. Where'd they nail him, Dad? In Amsterdam on several counts of art forgery. He stepped off the plane from Cairo and walked straight in the arms of the Dutch police. Chet flashed a wise look at his two chums. When he received the secret warning, I had a hunch of Pharaoh's curse was no laughing matter. It sure caught up with Zufar and his gang. He hooked his thumbs under his belt. Now, this case is closed, he said with an air of satisfaction. We can relax a little, eh? How about going to Captain Early's place and eating more juicy lamb chops, I suppose? Joe put in with a quick smile. Quit reading my mind. Wait, Chet has a point, Frank concluded. I think Captain Early should get a first-hand report of the final salvo, and I'll present the cane, Chet said. With a victory whoop, the boys set off, unaware at the moment that the Twisted Claw, their next mystery, would soon plunge them into another harrowing adventure. Well, finally finished the Tardy Boys. All done. It was a long time coming, but I got it done. So that was part 4 and the finale of the Hardy Boys, The Secret Warning. So I hope you enjoyed that, my friends. I want to thank you for tuning in, and keep those comments coming. I love hearing from you. So in the meantime, you look after yourselves, look after each other, and we'll see you next time, okay? Bye now.